Hello everyone, and welcome to UXPin Talks. It's a series of interviews with professionals from the field of UX from all walks of life. They share their thoughts on what UX means to them, teach us, and inspire us. So tune in. Today we have Rocio Lopez, who is a product designer at Sumo Logic. She specializes in data visualization and prototyping. She also loves to connect with new designers as well as aspiring designers seeking to break into the startup world. Off the screen, she enjoys Lindy Hop and running. Rocio, welcome to the show. To start off, can you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Julia. It's a great pleasure to share with you guys any insights that I can share on design. Just a little bit about myself. So I've been designing for about 6 years, and I've been in different environments, so corporate, freelancing at small startups, and then now a mid-sized startup at Sumo Logic. I really love prototyping, and actually that's how I discover your tool, because a lot of the design that I do is communicated across different stakeholders, and we constantly have to show our designs, not just in static screens, but also in real prototypes.
Right, that's what actually UXPin is about. So can you tell us more about how you got into UX yourself? How did it all begin?
Yeah. Um, so originally, I was actually studying economics and political science at Columbia University. And when I graduated, I actually couldn't work like most of my classmates because I was here undocumented. So that limited my options in terms of having a career. However, one of the things that I've been doing for a while is that I worked on the school newspaper, both in high school and then in college, and I started doing a lot of my own side projects to learn about the different the different elements of graphic design, and that's how I kind of started out. So when I came back from New York City to East Palo Alto, where my parents were living, I started reaching out to different businesses in Palo Alto and offering my design skills as a freelancer, of course, and that's how I built my portfolio, and then also through doing that, I started learning more about user experience design. Originally, I was just mostly doing posters and marketing branding, but eventually, just from jumping from one project to another, people asked, "Oh, can you fix my website here and there?"
Awesome.
And eventually, so a few years ago, I went into this program called DACA, which allowed me to get a work permit, and that's where I am today. So that allows me to have some freedom here in the United States and work for any company I want.
So you went from the ground up and became a product designer as of right now. So the next question is that I've been wanting to ask you. There are a lot of people nowadays that want to enter the user experience field. As you worked as a marketing consultant and then became a designer, I'm curious about the skills you had to learn to make that transition.
There were actually a lot. So there's a lot of titles in the industry nowadays, and of course the big one is product designer. But when I started out, I actually mostly focused on user experience and UX at the or what it encompasses basically is being able to think through different workflows and also understand what the users need and want. And then there's another one which is more of the UI focus, the user interface. So in this is like thinking through the visuals, thinking through how things are implemented on a mobile device or a web app, whatever is the place you're building. And then of course, product design is mostly, it encompasses all both UX, UI, as well as product thinking, which is how do you actually think through what you're designing as something that's going to be either a business or going to scale to many people. And at the top of my mind, there's definitely three things. So one, of course, is having strong communication. Yes, you can present designs, but can you also present designs and persuade stakeholders outside of design to understand how you thought through the solution? And then the other part is definitely the craft. And the craft really varies. So, for example, someone can be very visual, and that's their specialty. Another person can be very can think through the interaction, the interaction design, micro interactions. So it all usually the craft takes time to figure out because you need to really work through different projects in order to understand what you're good at. Um, and then the last part is definitely the teamwork. So being able to work with a group, a very diverse group of people, because nowadays we segmented design into different areas. So we have design systems, we have UI engineers. So there's a lot of interactions that happen, and definitely being both a team player as well as a leader is really important.
Yes, I understand. So for those who want to start designing themselves, is there any advice you would give for starters?
Yeah, all you have to do is start designing. It could
Start it, yeah.
be anything. It could be like a volunteer project. It could be something personal related to you. That's how I really started. Like I remember just to learn about type. I was actually just trying to make my own type at the time. And that's how I started reading about the different graphic designers, learning about space, colors, shapes, and just the basic fundamentals. I think when you just dive deep into something, you just start like learning both the language as well as how other people have done it and how can you improve on it or add something different to it.
Ex-
Um,
Yeah, exactly. Just like you said, you just gotta dive right into it, and it's gotta be your main focus.
yeah,
So right now, at Sumo Logic, you're a product designer. Could you tell us more about it? What is your role
yeah.
specifically?
Yeah, so I came to Sumo Logic 2 years ago, and I mostly been focused on our analytics product, which encompasses thinking through both the design and interaction of new solutions that are coming to market. I particularly focus a lot on prototyping and also working with a design lead in our team. I also work with design systems to make sure that whatever we are building actually is consistent with our overall design language, patterns, and of course our brand. Um, I've had the privilege of actually seeing the team scale because when I got here, we were actually really tiny. And now we have designers in India and maybe even Poland someday.
Oh, wow. So speaking of collaboration between designers and any other team members, what is it like when it comes to collaboration between designers and technical members of the team during the product development process? As a product designer, when working, for example, with developers, how do you present your ideas to the team to explain things to get the right feedback so that everyone is on the same page and understands where the product should be going?
Yeah. So I started thinking about this in two ways because um, when I first started, like I was saying, we were really small, and I had the freedom to just walk up to the engineer, talk through the design, and get feedback. Or when we were auditing implementation, it was much easier, right? Because they're right there sitting next to me. However, as we grew, and especially, for example, this big initiative that I'm doing right now, our teams are split. Like front end is in India and also here, and then our back end team is in Poland, actually.
Oh, wow.
Uh, And I mean, yes, communication gets harder, and that's where I think having a tool like UXPin kind of help us a lot. So I was working closely with one of the tech leads, Adam, and Adam had a lot of ideas and definitely like wrote a lot of documents of how this thing works and the things that we should be considering. But at one point, it became really, it's so hard to read so many documents because on top of that, you have to respond to things on Slack or Jira.
Right.
So we actually created a UXPin guest account so that he could actually go into UXPin and just quickly wireframe the idea or the concept. And I think it really helped a lot because it kind of bridged that communication gap, right? That's
Yeah.
very tough to catch up on. And then it also it provided a space to go back and forth and actually pinpoint to specific areas. Usually our stakeholders who are in other regions, they come here and see us like maybe once a year. But again, that is so difficult to do for everybody else. So definitely just having something like that middle place where we can share ideas,
Hmm.
comment, it has definitely helped a lot.
And just out of curiosity, does the marketing team also work in UX Pin in terms of sharing feedback and ideas, or do you just use it for product?
It's mostly for product.
Oh,
And that's the other thing. Our engineers are very open-minded and they're willing to try out things. So when Adam looked at UXPin, he wasn't like overwhelmed by the UI or I don't know, scared of it. He was like, okay, I'm gonna put this together and grab here and there components. I think probably like I would hope that more definitely other stakeholders outside of design would do that because it definitely helped us prototype faster.
great.
I can actually reuse some of the things Adam proposed to improve the overall prototype.
Great. So how would you describe the relationship between designers and developers at Sumo Logic?
hmm So if you're definitely working with a developer in another region, you have to do more communication, and that's where the tools definitely are very helpful for providing that medium. And you also have to constantly communicate the overall vision because it's pretty easy to just get caught up in the details of like, this is the Jira, this is the task, right? But
Mm-hmm.
when people have an understanding of the overall vision, it's much more easier for people or engineers to have a point of view on like, okay, maybe we shouldn't try this because of X, Y, and Z. Um, so definitely lots of more effort on communication. Here, when the engineers are on the same time zone and we can connect to each other, um, I've been starting to do more like in-person handoff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
before I send a link or anything to any designs, I actually set up a meeting so that we can sit together and actually have a conversation about the design. It doesn't necessarily say, oh, this is what the design should be, but I want feedback from them so I can iterate or throw out some things that are not helpful. So it becomes more like, again, like a discussion, right? And then
Right.
afterwards, we do the links and stuff. Um,
Right. As a mutual brainstorm as well. So, in terms of collaboration and the main vision and building products in general, no one really wants to build bad products and release any failures into the market. So, I was curious about your opinion. What is the heart of the problem in terms of just building a better product? Do companies actually like stop and ask and answer questions like, what are we trying to do? What behavior do we want to change for our users? And what to do to cause these behaviors?
mhm. Yeah, and definitely is reflected in our overall design process. So before we actually spend time on the delivery phase, we
Mm-hmm.
actually spend a significant amount of time on the exploratory phase, and that's where we're trying to understand what are we building, why are we building it, and what is the problem we're trying to solve. And during my first year at Sumo Logic, I say that I had a very pretty grounded I was very grounded in that area because we were trying to build a new product solution, and instead, before investing any engineering resources, it was really critical for us, the design team, to come together and figure that out. In that part of the process, um, we have research really helped a lot, uh,
Mm-hmm.
from doing concept testing of storyboards or just quick wireframes within that we can show to our internal stakeholders, because our product is actually even used by our engineers um, for monitoring the health of a system, and then that helped us improve the overall wireframe or working prototype that we bring to customers. During that phase, also, it's important to really paint a vision, so that by the end, everyone in the team has just a quick, like they can understand this like an elevator pitch. Okay, this is what we're trying to build.
Right. That sounds great. Actually, and what is the most challenging project you've ever worked on?
Yeah.
Can you think of any, or are there a few?
Yeah. I mean, currently the one that I'm working on definitely has been really challenging, because of I would say it's given that our product is very technical,
Mm-hmm.
and as a designer, I don't come from an engineering background. There's a certain level of understanding I need to have about how what we're working on works. Um, And one of the things that I remember doing a lot in the beginning is that I actually met with different uh, subject matter experts, and we would actually draw together on the whiteboard about how this particular thing, which is Kubernetes, works. Um, and I would try to ask, like, instead of explaining like the actual technology or the jargon, I try to use like an analogy or just simple abstract terms that do not even relate to technology, so that we could be on the same page and have a better understanding. And also, when I went back to the other designers, I could actually say it without using any jargon.
Yeah.
I think as you become a more mature designer, you're able to do that level of abstraction really quickly, that you can like start really whiteboarding with all the different stakeholders.
Oh, okay. And is that what your design process looks like today, or has it changed?
I think it definitely has evolved, right? Prior to Sumo Logic, I was working on a mix of less technical products, more consumer oriented, and so it was much more easy to understand just from doing quick usability studies or research, what people wanted and why they wanted it. I think when there's that extra layer of technical complexity to it, I think it's pretty easy to get caught up on that before moving forward in the design. And I think that for me, again, back to if you don't have that engineering background, it can be very difficult. But not all products are like that.
No, it actually depends on the product. It depends on the product. Me myself as a UX writer, of course, I can relate to that. It depends on what you're describing, right? What kind of words you should say, rather use the technical terms or not. But after all, everything has to be understandable to the user. So let's shift the topic of the conversation about to education. At the beginning, you mentioned that you studied economics and political science at Columbia University. How does the field of your studies impact your career?
I think it definitely helps a lot when you don't come from a design background to understand other stakeholders. So, for example, one thing I've noticed is that I'm not afraid to talk about the business or understand metrics. And that's something that I think is become, well, I'm seeing that it's becoming more important nowadays. Designers don't just need to design pixels, they need to understand why are we designing it? Like, what is that business metric we're trying to move?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm glad I'm really blessed that I've had that or that unconventional starting point. Um, it also makes me confident approaching other people as well,
Mm-hmm.
and asking for clarification. I think so. I mentor other designers in the field, and one thing I keep hearing over and over is that, oh, I'm just here having lunch with my designers, and this is the only space that I'm comfortable with because I like to talk design, or I like to just be in this bubble. Um, me, I'm like, I'm pretty comfortable just going up to anyone and just you
So
know.
it's it's helped you with your soft skills, definitely from what you're saying. And speaking of mentoring, I've read that you were coaching PhD students at Stanford. This is very unusual, or maybe it's usual, to divide your time between teaching someone and actually designing. Could you fill us in?
Yeah, so when I was freelancing, I actually had a challenge that I wasn't a great communicator. And one of my friends was like, "Oh, Rocio, you should like try Toastmasters." And I was like, "What is Toastmasters?" Well, Toastmaster is a nonprofit organization that helps people become better communicators by practicing speeches
Right. Hmm.
and doing volunteering. And I went to Stanford at the time, and I just started like getting involved in the club. And then within a few years, little did I know, I was like, oh, I want to run for president, or I want to do X, Y, and Z role in the club, because it was actually very exciting to become better at something while still like having the opportunity to hang out around really talented people in a very social environment too. So eventually, so I went from being a member to taking on leadership roles. And one thing that I really loved is that I also became better at providing feedback as a designer, by helping other people like understand how to improve their own way of communicating. And it was interesting too because so usually I'm in the tech world and I'm only talking to people and going to the Stanford Business School and just meeting people from different backgrounds who are doing completely different things not related to tech. It also just made me more aware of what's out there in the world
Yeah,
besides just.
exactly. Not be in the bubble of the technical world, right? Just step out and learn about other fields. That's really important. It's very, very impressive. I've also heard that you won a hackathon. Maybe you would like to tell us about it too.
Yeah, so again, going back to what you were saying, like how did I get into design? A lot of it was just doing design, right? Like just jumping into things. And the way I found some of my freelancing work is by connecting with other people. So I would go to these different hackathons and just try to meet new people as well as work on something. So I would put it on my portfolio. I've done several. I don't know if there's a particular one.
Wow.
Like I remember, like I did one on immigration, and then I think probably the last one I did was we were trying to help Hillary Clinton, their organization tried to provide better guidance to voters on how to get
Right.
to the polls. And this was a very like very MVP-ish type of app that we did. Um, but I remember again,
It was the registration app or
yeah,
just oh, okay.
yeah, it was. I think it was registration. Sorry, it was a long time ago.
That's fine.
But just by doing that, again, definitely sharpened my design skills and just got to see other types of problems, meet other people. Unfortunately, because we were coming in really late, we didn't have time to actually pitch this to the organization so that they could actually implement this. So this was just an MVP, but it was a very interesting experience.
After all, you've always learned from experience. So since we'll be wrapping up, I'm gonna ask you my favorite question. What is your definition of user experience?
Uh, UX, user experience, there's so many. So I think there's several ways of looking at it depending on where you are. I mean, it actually, like that definition is different in different companies. For example, if you go to Airbnb, the designers, they don't have the title of product designer, their title is user experience design. And they cover everything from like concept all the way up to delivery. And of course, the user is at the center of everything. Like they even have storyboards posted on the wall. But if you go to a more, I would say like a company that's just, they have a product out in the market and they're just hiring their first designer and they just need help polishing some stuff. Um, their definition of user experience design could be very different. It could be just focused mostly on the pixels and the UI. Um, so I'm always very hesitant to define it because I think it just varies by where you are. But of course, the unicorns in Silicon Valley probably, I would say they have a better sense of a better definition of what it is.
Right. Okay. So one last question, if you could give any advice, personally or professionally to the listeners, what would these be?
Uh, so in this field, it's very important to connect with people, and um, so even though I'm not on social media as much, I still make it an effort to stay at least on Twitter. And the reason why I do it is because that's where I definitely find conversations related to what I'm doing, but also that's how I discover other designers and learn about their work, and then also reach out to them. And especially if you're early in your career, I think it's really important to just reach out to others, have a coffee chat, learn about how they approach their craft. You'll be surprised, but people like designers are very open. I mean, people love to talk about themselves, so they're
Right.
actually open to, having that coffee chat or video chat, whatever it may be. That has helped me a lot in understanding not just about design, but also, okay, how should I ask for compensation in my next role, or how should I negotiate X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's just very important. And I even like I was having lunch with one of my old coworkers, and she took me to her desk to put my bag down while we were so we could go to lunch. And as she was introducing me to her team, one of the guys was like, "Oh my God, Rocio, like I've seen you
Wow.
before." And I was like, "Yes, because I actually sent a cold email to you a long time ago." And my old coworker Brett was like, Rocio, you sent a cold email, and I'm like, yeah, because I actually needed help, and I thought this person, seems knowledgeable about this. And he met up with me, by the way. But yeah, it's okay to reach out to strangers,
Yes.
especially in this industry.
So networking is key, as you would say. All right. You have been a fantastic guest, Rocio. It's been a pleasure having you on the call. Thank you for joining us. Um, and well, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to follow us and tune in for the next episode of UXPin Talks. I'm Julia Halenuk, and I was your host.